Last week, I heard someone say, referencing the governmental transitions of this month, the person said, "I feel like the United States is no longer my home." And as I pondered what they might have meant by that, I recalled that 4 years ago, as a different president was about to take the oath, a different person said that I heard, "I feel like this country is no longer my home." What makes a country your home? What makes a city home? A neighborhood home? Wherever you live, what makes it home? We tend to say things like home is where the heart is. There's this idea that home is connected with something of belonging or love. Have you ever lived somewhere for a long amount of time, but then returned to what was your childhood home and you'd been away for a while? Anyone ever done that? Oh, all right, a few. And often entering into such a trip, especially that first time, can be filled with all the nostalgia of what was. Memories of people and places. But then sometimes, and most of the time, something has changed. Sometimes in ways we don't appreciate. You go to visit where there used to be the soda fountain or ice cream shop on the bustling main street, and it's now a pawn shop, and empty storefronts, and empty sidewalks, and trash blowing in the wind. Or you remember playing catch with a dog in the wash on the edge of town, or in that field filled with wildflowers, and now there is a Walmart. They literally paved paradise and put up a parking lot. Or maybe your grandparents' home has been bulldozed because they widened the road or extended the airport runway. That actually happened to my grandparents' home, that latter. And so, if we've had experiences like that, or can imagine experiences like that, perhaps we recognize some origin of the cliche, you can't go home again. And if we also can imagine that experience, we might have some taste of what the people in our Isaiah passage might have been experiencing, just some taste of it. A little bit of the backstory briefly. The Jewish people in the southern kingdom of Judah in the year 587 BCE, this will be on the test. In the year 587 BCE, the Babylonian Empire invaded. And they destroyed villages. They, as invading armies do, killed lots of people, not just soldiers, men, women, children. They came into the capital city of Jerusalem and started tearing down things and setting things on fire. And for the Jewish people, the greatest horror in that day was watching the temple come down. This was the seat not just of religion, but really for them of identity, of government, of we don't have a building like the temple was for these people. And many people, of course, were killed, but then others who survived, many of them were taken into exile and made to live in Babylon. And then after some years pass, the Babylonian Empire falls. And always when we pay attention to history, it's helpful to recognize no matter how great we think any empire is, they all fall. They always fall. It's just the story. So the Persian Empire takes over the Babylonian Empire, and the Persian Emperor Cyrus, aware of the Jewish people in exile in Babylon, says, "Go on home. You don't have to stay here anymore. You can have that land, that place back. Go rebuild. Go restore your nation. Go rebuild your temple." And by the way, they end up doing those things. The temple is built again. But as they return, as they go back, I imagine too the yearning, the longing. Oh, finally, those who remembered what home was. And I think about the psalm that says, By the rivers of Babylon, we sat down and wept. Our tormentor said, "Sing us one of the songs of Zion." How could we sing your song, Lord, in a foreign land? They yearned to go home. And so they get to go home, but then they come home, and of course, there's a waste, and there's maybe some structures. There's places that are familiar. There's the possibility and opportunity, but they get there and they don't feel at home. So what makes for home? It wasn't just the address, so to speak. What makes for home? Well, back to home is where the heart is. Home is usually connected with the idea of love. So I offer that when people think of home, true home, there's usually the notion of love connected with that. And I want to say a few things about the word love. We throw that word around a lot. Have you noticed in churches? I mean, it's good. I'd rather be part of the churches that say a lot about love than the opposite. But what doesn't always get talked about is, what do we mean when we say that? Because there's assumptions and it's so familiar. And I recognize that most people, when we hear the word love, we tend to think of a feeling. Usually something warm, fuzzy-ish. And yet, feelings come and go. So the idea that love could transform or change or be something you build on, well, if it could just be pulled out from under you, what does that mean? So love likely is more than that. And I appreciate the author, former professor at Yale and Oberlin, Bell Hooks. She's written a book about love. And she starts out by saying, I'm going to tell you a definition of love. And she says, I notice a lot of people write about love, poems about love, theses about love, and they don't actually say what love is. I'm going to tell you about love by talking first what it might mean. And she grabs a hold of a definition that she found helpful from M. Scott Peck. And I'm paraphrasing his definition, but it's along the lines of, love is going beyond yourself to nourish spiritual life in yourself and in other people. Love is going beyond yourself to nourish spiritual life in yourself and other people. And in that definition, spiritual life doesn't necessarily mean religious. Spiritual's being talked about more broadly in the sense of who you really are, your wholeness, the truth of who you are. So love extending beyond itself to nourish yourself and others in the truth of who you really are. And that resonated with a working definition I've been utilizing over some years that for me came from looking up the words for love that are connected with God and with Jesus in the biblical texts, in the Hebrew and the Greek. And a definition that I found helpful is, love is committed self-offering. Committed self-offering. It can include feelings, of course, but just as an example, when Jesus says, love your enemy, and a lot of us will be like, I'm supposed to have warm fuzzies toward my enemy, and never mind. I mean, it's so far away. But if there's this notion that, well, what do it mean to have committed to offer myself for the good of whoever I have in mind? It still might be hard, but it might seem like something that's possible. So committed self-offering. So as the people are coming back to the land and the possibilities of rebuilding, home is love, and, well, the place can't love them that way. The buildings, the structure, the possibilities of a new temple and setting up a government, all the things that just they took for granted before and that they're going to have to rebuild, none of that actually loves them in the sense of committed self-offering. And so they get to the place, but they're not being loved. So they're looking for love. Anyone know that old country song? Yeah, the sermon title was supposed to make you think of that, right? In all the wrong places. So where is love? Where is the love they're seeking if it's not in the things and what they can touch and handle and manipulate or put into place or power? The psalmist is wanting to sing about that. And the psalmist, we hear, says that steadfast love, which is the committed love of God, this love of God is higher than the heavens. And the elements of God, up to the clouds, down to the depths, it fills every nook and cranny of the universe. There is a divine source of committed self-offering that's available in every moment, every space, every time, wherever you are geographically, whatever is rising and falling, this is available to you. And so there's an opportunity, a call in the psalm, let that love in. Let that love in. If you're looking for the love in the stuff, in the structures, in the possibilities of your religion structure, your government structure, or a new infrastructure to build Jerusalem, it doesn't love you that way. But there's this love of God available. And this takes us back to the Isaiah passage. So God is still speaking through Isaiah, the prophet. And the people, they've come to this place of home, doesn't feel like home, maybe looking for love in the wrong places, and they feel desolate and forsaken. It feels like, where's the hope? Where's the promise? And so God is speaking through the prophet saying, the truth is, I'm right here. You're looking for the love in the thing and the rebuilding and the familiar places and the old stomping grounds. That's not where the love is. It's right here. I'm right here. And I call you no longer forsaken. I delight in you. You are my delight. You are my delight. Which is a lot like the words we heard from the baptism of Jesus. This is my beloved with whom I am well pleased. And so there's this call, this invitation that God is offering to this people who are feeling dislocated, where everything feels like it's been turned upside down and they can't see the way forward. God's saying, I'm like the bridegroom, you're the bride, we're together. And wherever we're together, there is home. And from home, we can build, we can live. And this helps Israel to live into God's original call and purpose to them, which with Genesis, it's to be a blessing to the nations. Another part of Isaiah, be a light to the nations. But they were supposed to show home to the world. And so there's that reminder, I will show you love that you can then embody love, and that you can show the world what justice, mercy, kindness, care, inclusion, all the goodness, what it looks like, so others will feel loved. You help them be home wherever they are, and that has the power to change the world. A few weeks back, I was referencing a talk I heard by the late Dr. Tony Campolo. He was professor emeritus at Eastern University in the Philadelphia area, sociology professor. He'd also been an advisor to United States presidents, and depending on when we grew up, he might have been your keynote speaker at a youth event for something denominational or a big gathering. And the theme of that particular talk, which was at a local church in the mainline suburbs of Philadelphia, was what he called red letter Christianity. Anyone ever have or has a red letter Bible? Just curious. And some of us are like, what is that? And am I supposed to? It's all right. So the red letter Bible, they're often a King James version. And there was this editorial publication decision some time back where we will put all the words of Jesus in red. And so that's what a red letter Bible is. All the words, easy to find. And Campolo, he talked about red letter Christianity because he noticed a lot of Christianity does not take the words of Jesus seriously. That he says Jesus actually meant these things. It wasn't like, oh, interesting food for thought, or I'll have to contemplate that. He would say when Jesus says, take care of the poor, he meant it. When he says, bind up the brokenhearted, he meant it. So he's talking about taking seriously the words, the teaching, the ways that Jesus lived in the world. And there was in this session a Q&A, some dialogue, and one of the people stood up and asked him, Dr. Campolo, it seems that you've had a conversion from churchianity to Christianity. And he said, I'll explain. Churchianity, a lot of us, we've just grown up, not what it means to be Christian is you're a member of a church, you're on a committee, you give some money, and you hope for the best when you die. And you, something changed for you. That you're saying what it means to follow Jesus is that we're going to actually live the things he's talking about. So what changed? And Dr. Campolo said, I learned to pray differently. We need to learn to pray differently. He said, we usually come to God with our laundry list, and we can, the joys, the sadnesses. He said, but I started to learn I need to let it sink in a little more. I needed to make time and space to just be with God. He said, I can't embody Christ if I'm not infused with Christ. And he talked about other things that you infuse. It takes time. And prayer can be like that, where it helps us be infused with Christ. And then we have in us what we can live Christ in the world. And as I thought about that, I was thinking about writing from the life of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And some of you maybe have read this work before, these sections, where he's conveying the story of a time where he was at home. And of course, there were always threats on his life, always shaming and threats that were made to Dr. King. But there had been this increase of threats made to his family, to his spouse, to his children, a threat to home. And he relays the story of how it's the middle of the night, and what he's thinking about is bowing out of this movement. And he writes, though, instead of bowing out, I bowed down. And he has this time of prayer that he relays in his writing. And in the prayer, he said, he let it all out. He shared with God his fear, sadness, the feelings. And he said to God, I can't do this alone. And then he just waited. And he said he was filled with a sense of presence, a sense of assurance. And he said he heard something like a voice calling him by name, Martin, Martin, and reminding him that he could continue to stand up for justice. He could continue to stand up for righteousness. And God promised him in what he was hearing is, and you are not alone. And I was thinking of that as Dr. King talking about being infused with Christ, or the language from last week, being immersed in the Spirit. And so I think about that here, the gift of this story early on as we're moving into some stories of the life and ministry of Jesus. This gift of a story from his scriptures, a story of people who are not feeling at home but longing for home, longing for safety, for love, and the ways any of us, all of us, I know I do, I sometimes look for love scrolling on my phone. I'm not talking dating apps. I'm just talking Facebook. But right, like, how many likes did we get? Or how many people showed up for this event? Or whatever. We look for love in all kinds of places. And the reminder, the beautiful reminder that it's everywhere, as close as the air we breathe. And that there are those who've let themselves be infused with Christ, infused with love, and we might experience it in and with them and in and with community. And I think about, I don't know, there's always fraught times. There's times where people are like, this is unprecedented. And then I think, well, when we look at the scope of history, maybe this exact event, but it's often and always been times of insecurity and tumult and turmoil. But one of the lines that's been going through my head this week, and it's a bit surprising because it's not a hymn I'm singing all the time. There's a line in the hymn, Onward Christian Soldiers. And it's just one of the verses. And in the line, and it's been going through my head, crowns and thrones may perish, kingdoms rise and wane, but the cross of Jesus constant will remain. The temples, the structures, the rulers, they rise and fall again and again and again. But the cross, the embodiment of grace, mercy, committed self-offering, it's always here, always available. And we can seek infusions of it and embody it and live it in the world. In your bulletin, you'll see a take-home prayer. And I'm offering a resource, see it as an experiment, but an infusion contemplative practice to just try at home. It's like something we'll also be doing on the prayer and meditation retreat, but I wanted to offer a resource for the journey this week. Let us follow in the way of love that never lets us go, so that we can be love for a world that needs this. In Christ's name, amen.